Today I'm beginning a 3-part series about defining spiritual maturity. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart. When I was a little girl, I used to observe some of my friends that went to church every single Sunday. And I thought that they were really religious. And then as I became a little bit older, I became aware that some of the people that were going to church were not really learning any lessons and weren't really practicing anything. They were just kind of going, like they were checking the God box off on their to-do list for the week. So I was taking all that in, observing, and then in my 20s, I had my own spiritual awakening. And during that time, I did not want to associate with anything, quote, religious. I'm spiritual, not religious, and didn't want to follow any rules that existed within the world around religion. I'm not quite so steadfast in that today, but I still have a little bit of that in me. People that come to Unity really want to explore their own spirituality at depth, and I think that's very individual and unique. And so I honor each of us in that journey. Now fast forward to today, where I think there's a cutting edge of spirituality that's very new. And it involves really the creation and the invention of the internet, which we're all taking part in today, but also it's created this global spiritual dialogue that has really never existed before. And it's only been going on for maybe the last decade or two. I'll even credit a few very wise spiritual leaders in many different religions all over the world that have come together, and they've identified 9 qualities that are showing up within their religions that are marks that show that a person has a high spiritual maturity. So today is part 1 of that series with 3 aspects of divine character that I want to share with you. To get started, first of all, I want to bring a few new terms to you. One of them is the term interspiritual. I don't know if any of you have heard this. This is fairly new. It's called a spirituality of the heart, the phenomenon of wisdom traditions sharing resources with each other. And this term was actually coined by Brother Wayne Teasdale, but I would have to share with you that I may also credit it to Trappist monk Father Thomas Keating. He was the one, I would say 20 years ago, who was bringing these very diverse spiritual leaders together, not far from here in Snowmass, Colorado, to have these dialogue conversations. And in this time, they were invited to have a conversation not about their particular religion, but to share about their own personal transformational experience that they were arriving at by experiencing their practice in their own religion. Another term that I want you to hear about is the new monastic. But before I get to the new monastic, I want to share about the old monastic. I think the word monastery is probably a common term that people have heard of. It's kind of archetypal. And you see the monastery that's secluded up in the hills. I think of nuns and priests that would gather in these environments and pray and chant and meditate. And they lived very secluded lives, and they removed themselves from society. They were focused completely on their spiritual life, and that was their one goal. So some people that might come to mind that kind of lived that life were Martin Luther, also St. John of the Cross, and one of his teachers, St. Teresa of Avila. So this is the old school, the old monastic. And then fast forward a little bit, this is actually Father Thomas Keating, and he just recently passed away, I'll let you know. He's dear to Unity because he was very much instrumental in creating centering prayer, which is a practice that Unity follows. But he also led a very monastic life with the robes and the very individual and private life dedicated to spirit. Somebody else that we are very familiar with from many people in Unity is the Dalai Lama. Yes. Again, the robes and focusing just on spirit. So introduce today what the new monastic is. This is the new monastic. They look just like you and me. So here's a definition. These are the people who are not interested in imposing a new and fixed rule, but rather want to commit to a daily practice of putting aside their egos and exploring what it means to create a world that works for all. A world that is rooted in the principles of direct democracy, mutual aid, trust in our original goodness, and a radical acceptance of each individual and the unique gifts that each has to offer. Now here is an example, Mirabai Starr. I don't know if any of you have heard of her. She actually spoke at the Unity Lyceum a couple years ago. She's an example of somebody who's a new monastic. And this is because she's deeply spiritual and she's studied many different religions, and yet she's never identified with any one of them. So don't confuse this with shallow spirituality where people church hop and jump and never learn anything. This is very different. This is deep depth spirituality. This is people really diving deeply into many different religions and then bringing all of those really awarenesses, ideas together in how they live their life. And so listen to how she describes the new monastic. As a member of the growing tribe of interspiritual beings who draw from the many wells of the world's timeless mystical teachings, and with these mingled waters cultivate the garden of your soul and feed the hungry. The path of the new monastic requires deep quiet, deep listening, and deep dialogue. So she also says this is a path not for people who want predictable questions and reliable answers. This is the path of the unknown. This is a new course that's being charted. So I felt that was important to share that before we dive deeply into some of what these 9 different qualities of spiritual maturity are about. The first one of those is called actual moral capacity. So what is your own personal moral code? This emerges out of knowledge of our political systems, our sociological realities, the revealed truths of our wisdom traditions. But keep in mind, it emerges from that, but it's not that. It's not from society. And it's not merely related to what is lawful. You know, you may not have a law about something, so there may not be a law, or there may be a law. There may not be, I'm confusing myself, sorry. So if there may actually not be a law about something, and yet it's not moral, okay? So just be aware of that. So let's go further into this. It says actual moral capacity is based on a transformed new inner nature, and this is really the focus. The moral capacity comes from ourselves, not from out there. The moral dimension of the spiritual journey that has nothing to do with external rules and regulations, but with the fundamental, radical reorientation of the person's inner commitment to be established permanently and concretely in love and compassion. And I would have to share with you that the big part of this is the bottom line there, in love and compassion. So I found an example that I want to share with you, and this is a little bit deep. It's actually a video that's 3 minutes long. It's a news story. And it's a story of love and compassion. It's also a story of forgiveness. This is also a story I've shared with many of my students at Unity Village, and it's great for conversation. But I think it's really a supreme example of what it means to live a life of actual moral capacity. I say this is sensitive because it's actually about a school shooting of some Amish children from years ago. But it's also a story of healing. So if you can go ahead and roll the video.
As the nation marks the anniversary this week of the
Can you turn it up, please?
Families of some of the 26 who were killed attended a vigil today at the National Cathedral in Washington. Prayers were offered for all of the victims of gun violence in this country, and that would include the 5 young Amish girls who were killed and 5 who were wounded just a few years ago in South Central Pennsylvania. Jeff Lord tells us that out of the horror of that school shooting has come a lesson in forgiveness.
It's been 7 years since Terry Roberts' life changed forever. In October 2006, her 32-year-old son Charlie walked into an Amish school in Lancaster County and shot 10 young girls before killing himself.
I heard the sirens and saw helicopters. Then the phone was ringing and it was my husband. And he said, I need you to come to Charlie's house right away. And I got out of the car and I looked at my husband and these sunken eyes just saying, it's Charlie. That could not be. And yet it truly was. It was true. It was our son.
Robert's initial reaction was that she had to move away. But the Amish came to her house the night of the shooting to say they wanted her to stay. Some of the victims' families attended her son's funeral.
There are not words to describe how that made us feel that day. And then for the mother and father that had lost not just one, but two daughters at the hand of our son, to come up and be the first ones to greet us. Wow. Is there anything in this life we shouldn't forgive?
Terry Roberts now shares this message with those who've experienced trauma. And every Thursday, she cares for the most seriously wounded survivor of the shooting, now 13. It's against Amish beliefs to appear on camera, so Donald Craig often speaks on their behalf.
You have this mother who raised a son that did this horrific damage to this young woman. And the mother has the courage and the spiritual fortitude to come back and to care for this young woman. And the parents of the young woman welcome her into their home. It's a powerful, powerful story.
Those families in Newtown who may still have understandably conflicted feelings now still less than a year later, what do you say to them?
Ask God to provide new things in your lives, new things to focus on, and that doesn't take the place of what is lost. But it can give us a hope and a future.
A future made possible for Terry Roberts because of forgiveness. Jeff Glore, CBS News, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
It's okay to cry, Bet. You know, the first time, I've seen this several different times. It is sad, honey. And it's a story of love and compassion and healing that was even created out of a horrible situation. I couldn't think of a more profound way to explain what actual moral capacity is. And also, I've had people asking me about my own son who was involved in an incident at the university here close by recently. My son is fine, I want to let you know that. But it was really quite interesting for me to observe my own responses to finding out exactly what had happened in the interaction with the young boys that are on campus. And I would just share that I really wasn't angry. You know, I had a moment of anger around mistreatment of my child, but really I was able to shift very quickly into compassion, not only for my own son, but also to the whole group of young men that are learning how to interact together, and, you know, hopefully they'll learn more healthier ways to interact together. So I'll just share with that. The answer is always compassion, love, and compassion. So when there are good, merciful, loving, wise, gentle, patient, and compassionate, simply because that's what we are in our realized nature, not because our system tells us to be this way. So again, actual moral capacity. The next one is solidarity of all living beings. Okay, this is a deep realization of the interconnectedness of everyone and everything. This unity undergirding of all reality being in life creates a sense of solidarity with all living beings, the earth, and the cosmos. It is a mystical perception of consciousness. When I first heard of this term, I immediately thought of a shift in my own reality when I heard a quote from an astronaut who'd been out in space. He'd actually been floating in space and observing Earth from far away. And he said, you know, one of the first things that I realized that there aren't any lines on the Earth. You know, we are taught from, you know, a very young age that, you know, we live in a certain state. And like, I live in Kansas and I'm part of the United States. And, you know, so those dividing lines seem to separate us more than unite us. So to just be in the space of realizing that we're all here on Earth, it's a kind of a breath of relief, just to acknowledge that we're all human and that we're all here together. In looking at this subject, I had to acknowledge some of what's going on in our world today. I actually picked these are some of the immigrants that are moving our way, and some of them have arrived at the border in Mexico. And I'll share with you, I'm not very political, but I just want to show that there are ways that we can apply these spiritual maturity ideas in our own life today. And when you see these people from far away, you maybe don't feel quite as connected to them. But look what happens when you get a close-up view and you can see actually who they are. You know, mothers, sisters, brothers, children. What I find most interesting about this right now is many years ago when I was in ministerial school, we actually had a scenario that we looked at in class. This is a social justice class. And it was a scenario where people from all over the world were wanting to come into our borders and to live in the United States. And the question was, what do we do? Little did I realize we'd be facing that in some level here right now. My heart, in and of itself, immediately said, well, I want to open the doors. I want, everybody to feel safe and to have a safe life like I do. And yet, as we began talking about this issue, it's far more detailed than what I ever imagined. I learned that it's similar to a situation where you might have a lifeboat out on the ocean, and there's a large number of people that are in the water, and if you try to get all the people on the boat, then what happens? The boat sinks. It does. So it's very important when we're looking at how we help and assist people that we make sure that we keep our resources strong as we do that. And so this seems to be a common question that I keep hearing in the community these days, and I'm just suggesting maybe that's an appropriate question. It probably is, but there are also other questions maybe that we could be asking at the same time and going to a deeper place, like, how do we help these people? Could we start looking at that as well while we still protect the border so that we feel that connection and that we have an avenue perhaps that we can help? I know they said there were maybe 7,000 at the most people that were coming this way. What happens if those people were actually brought into this country and churches help support people from all over the United States, those 7,000 people? They would be, it's not exactly their own home community, but they'd be here and they'd be safe. Again, it's just an idea and perhaps an opening to have a different conversation, which is maybe what I'm trying to create. The spiritual life requires that we are ready to respond to the suffering of those we meet along the way because they are connected to us. And then the third one I want to talk about today is deep nonviolence. I love this little picture. I think it's a koala. Don't you think? Yeah. It is cute. When the spiritual life has put down deep roots, there's a natural organized evolution into deep nonviolence. The realization of the interconnectedness of all beings brings with it a sense of the utter preciousness of all life. Every being and every species is precious and irreplaceable. Now the spiritually mature have a natural sensitivity towards all other persons and their creature and other creatures, and a profound awareness of the divinity and worth of everyone and everything that is. And that includes even these great big redwood trees that you see in the picture. And when I talk about people that I want to emulate, I talk a lot about people like Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. But recently, I was reminded of a person that inspired me many years ago, and that is Julia Butterfly Hill. Have you ever heard of her? She was in the news many years ago. She climbed a redwood tree in Northern California, and she lived in it for 2 years. She was protesting the cutting of the ancient forest, and she was there to protect that tree. She actually named the tree Luna. So when I first heard about this story, I actually thought she might be a little bit crazy. Yeah, but then as I really listened, I could even step into what she was talking about. So I have a short video from her and her comments. If you can go ahead and run that.
The hardest part of all, if I had to pick one point, would be when they were cutting all the trees down. I start to cry every single time I talk about it because it was like, it's like sitting there watching your family killed in front of you. And you listen for hours, and your heart is screaming, and you feel like it's going right through your body. And then they stop the chainsaws and they pound this wedge in. Clink, clink, clink. And you can feel it. It's like, ah, ah, ah. And then they give the final clink. And then she goes, ah, and it screams. And you have to sit there and listen to it scream as it's dying.
So you can stop it there. So again, do you feel how deeply her connection was to the earth and to the tree, I absolutely learned reverence from Julia or someone like her. And she even said, how can we cut something like this down and not think that we are affecting something much deeper in ourselves? She even admitted that she had actually been in a car crash when she was 22, which was shortly before this. She said she'd been pursuing her career and success and material things. And then she said this crash actually really woke her up. She said she started focusing on the importance of the moment and doing whatever she could to make a positive impact in the world. She said the steering wheel that landed in her head, both figuratively and literally, steered her in a new direction in her own life. So she was an example of what it means to be a person of deep nonviolence. She exhibited gentleness, calm, patience, and even humility. We'll be talking a little bit more about humility in the next session of the series. So here we go, claiming spiritual maturity. These are the first three aspects. And I would ask that you, as you've been talking about these, have you been able to check in and actually see how you fit into those specific categories? That's what I'm hoping that you'll be willing to do. Actual moral capacity, solidarity with all living beings, and deep nonviolence. Yeah, many of you noticed as you came in, I hope you got a little bookmark. I'm trying to send a reminder home with you so that you have what all of these qualities are. And I actually believe it's the baby steps along the way that get us where we want to go. You know, these are some really big examples that I presented, but if you could capture just one moment in each day that you could do a little bit in one of these categories, think how much you would grow over an entire year. It would be profound. It really would be. As I close today, I want to share with you a little bit about the book that has inspired me to share these 9 aspects of spiritual maturity. It comes from the book called The New Monasticism, an interspiritual manifesto for contemplative living. And it's really in the back of the book that we're talking about. So there's a lot of information in here that I think is very current and trendy in the spiritual world if you're a reader and want to read something. As I close, I want to read a paragraph that actually was a prediction by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin many years ago. And it seems to resonate with what's going on right now in our world with the new monastic. May the time come when men and women, having been awakened to a sense of the close bond linking all the movements of this world in the single, all-embracing work of the incarnation, shall be unable to give themselves to any one of their tasks without illuminating it with the clear vision that their work, however elementary it may be, is received and put to good use by a center of the universe. When that time comes to pass, there will be little to separate life in the cloister from the life of the world. And ladies and gentlemen, that time is here, and it is now. Thank you so much for listening, and I really hope that you'll take time this week to review your bookmark and think how you can bring this into action in the world. Thank you.